Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Board Games Unlocked, and today I'm doing the final discussion for Descent: Legends of the Dark Act 1. So this was a campaign that me and my friend Josh were doing for the channel, and I can't remember exactly how many scenarios we had done overall, but as you can clearly tell, we did not finish the series for the channel, and this is one of those instances whenever I do a series or a campaign on the channel, I usually do a few episodes, a few whatever quests or whatever they're called. And then I do like a preliminary discussion, kind of what we're thinking, how we're feeling about the game at that point in time. And then I either do a completely end of campaign discussion, or I do another discussion where if we don't finish it out, you can pretty much guess why. So, because we didn't finish it for the channel, you can tell that we probably started to not really care for it or want to do it. We had done about, I think we recently did 2 more chapters, and we were extremely close to officially finishing out the overall story. I think there were like 2 overall things we had left to do before we just kind of ultimately called it. We weren't really vibing with the game as a whole as the campaign went on, and it just kind of felt that we would rather dedicate our time to doing something else for the channel. So with Act 2 now out, I believe it is officially released, I was like, okay, well, now here's the time for me to talk about Act 1. I still think that this Descent is better than the previous Descents. I know I'm in the minority there. I never really liked Descent. I never played First Edition, but I did not like Second Edition. I very much enjoyed almost every aspect of this better than those. And it's not to say that this game was bad. There were just elements of the campaign that we just got completely tired of, especially for a recording state, like the recording purposes. Like, the 3D terrain is really cool until you have to actually start fiddling with it, and it becomes kind of a hindrance whenever you're moving. And I feel that there's not a whole lot of strategy or depth with the monsters or the 3D terrain combat as there could be. It's more of like a, ooh, that looks really cool, versus, oh, that's, we can utilize terrain and, the stackable elements of the scenario. What I mean by that is, like, in combat, like, your movement is not just orthogonal, and I feel like that's a huge distinction for a lot of these type of combat-driven games, because if you're able to move diagonally, which you can in this, there's no reason to have pieces near you. There's no reason to have lava or water or anything like that. Like, if you have an area that's water, but you can just go from stone to cornerstone, I don't really find that. It's like, okay, why even have the water? It's never going to be a factor unless it's like a story element. The lava, never going to be a factor unless there's a story element. But whenever you have to move orthogonally, it allows for a lot more tactile decision making, how you want to spend your movement points, how the enemies are going to get to you, how you're going to flank the enemies. That all is done in other games that I feel like make the combat more tense. Like, Madara allows you to care about how you're moving, because while line of sight and stuff can be drawn diagonally, your movement cannot. So you have to be like, do I want to spend extra stamina to run there? I can't get there in my base movement. Do I want to spend extra stamina to increase my movement, but then I'm not going to be able to attack as much as I wanted to? Stuff like that, versus just like, I can get anywhere at any given point, so I'm able to do whatever I want. So whenever you're messing with the 3D terrain, and it's like, yeah, this looks really neat, but none of it's ever in my way. I can, like, if you have a tree in one spot, you'd have to go 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces to get around the tree, versus just diagonal for 2, which some people might like. They might like the fact that they're not hindered by all that. They can just, kind of hopscotch around all the pieces. But I kind of find it to be like, well, we're almost always within sight of anything, so yeah, the enemies are always going to get to us. And So that was kind of getting annoying. The 3D terrain was really neat at first, but then it started to get kind of cumbersome to deal with. And one of the biggest reasons that made me decide to just kind of call this as a campaign, well, I also did speak to Josh, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm not feeling it anymore." And there's actually a big distinction that I'll talk about in a sec, but is I saw how Act 2 was going to be, and I was like, "Oh, it's more of the same. I'm not interested." Because whenever you're talking about the narrative of Descent Legends of the Dark, I can't really tell you what is happening. Not because I have trouble retaining it, it's because it's just so generic that it's just like, oh, okay, evil force, take over world, good guys stop them, and that's pretty much it. I don't find any of the characters compelling. And a lot of this is done, I feel like this would have done really well years ago, but because of audio narration being put into these campaign games, those just elevate that stuff so much more. Like, if you have pre-written characters, like, this would make sense if we made our characters and we, like, they obviously couldn't write for that. Okay, well, then we have to roleplay and act all that out. That's perfectly fine. But if you have pre-written characters that are supposed to have motives and backstories and opinions and feelings, whenever your game, especially a game like this where you have so much that's done on a laptop or an app, don't ever use the app, just use the laptop. When there's so much into that and you don't integrate voice acting into your heavily narrated game, a lot of it is lost. Especially if you're not playing with a max group of people, or even if you are, one person has the laptop. Like, you can't share screens. Like, so it's like one person has it, and you're not going to be passing that around to have everyone read their lines whenever not every character is going to be there. I guess they would be for the story purposes, but it's like, okay, so one person's doing it. It becomes incredibly taxing on the player reading it. And if one person's reading it, eventually it just sounds like droning on and on, so people check out, and it's like, whatever, let's just get to the scenario that's going to be a generic, oh, it's an alchemist lab. Okay, we're here now, I guess. So the narrative element of this being compared to so many other games, especially for the channel, I do so many campaign games. There's Oathsworn, there's Kinfire Chronicles now, there's Midara, and then at some point there was Aeon Trespass Odyssey, Familiar Tales, Sleeping Gods. Like, all 6 of those have audio narration. Like, hell, I can even probably go through Foreteller. Isofarian Guard, 7. All narrative-driven campaigns that this would fall into, that all have audio narration that takes that away, and so all players can be integrated into the story, and all of those just feel way more unique than this one does. Like, because the game was new when we did the discussion and we had jumped into it, the 3D terrain element you don't really see anywhere. That was cool. All the stuff in the computer, that's never been done before. So that was cool. But as you kept going on and on, that stuff lost its luster, so then you eventually just kind of realize that the game is just an all-right game. And you don't ever really feel like you've progressed or gotten any better. Like, the leveling up for the characters is so whatever. It's not really exciting. In fact, it's slightly hidden in the story. Like, whenever you're setting up, you're kind of like, you just kind of stick with what you got, and then you look and you're like, oh, I actually have XP that I can have. Ah, that means these cards are available. I'll just kind of stick with what's currently working, because it's not like the cards that you get at a later level are that much better. They're more situational. So it's like, oh, that's cool. Well, we still have that fatigue thing. That's there, and I mean, I still have to roll dice and hope I get what I want to use this new card. I'll just stick with whatever I have. Like, I like the fact that they have 6 individual characters that do play differently. Like, I'm not saying that these are all just kind of all the same. They do have, like, their weapons are different. the hilts and all the stuff that the laptop manages, all that is done extremely well. And I'm glad that the laptop exists to micromanage all of that. But all that just kind of gets lost. You craft stuff, you're overwhelmed with resources that's not managed in any way. Like, you just kind of have it. You look through all your stuff, and then you craft items, and then you're like, well, since this isn't tangible, I can't organize it in such a way that allows me to compare and contrast. Like, whenever you go to a video game and you're like, okay, I have this sword and here's a new sword, and usually it pops up and you can compare both, and if the game's really good, it'll be like red or green showing you what goes up and what goes down. This game doesn't have that. So you have a bunch of handles or items or upgraded weapons, and you're like, I can't really tell if this is better than what I currently have. So you just kind of have stuff, and you have resources, and you're like, okay, I have bombs that are around. We can choose those now, so those cards are tangible. But like the hilt and like the grip and on your weapons isn't there. It's more of just percentile or like stuff that's like, hey, you have a 20% to make an enemy exposed now. It loses all of its like coolness and uniqueness whenever you're 20 hours in. Which some people might say, well, you got 20 hours in, that must mean the game's really good. It's like, well, no. that just means that some scenarios took way too long. Like, the game itself, if you just stick with the main story, I think it's like 14 main things, few side quests here and there. I don't know. The overall story just never gripped me like all those other games I mentioned. I didn't care about any of the characters, even though they did have specific character side quests that you could go and like it's supposed to put some depth to them. But because there was no voice acting, you got no inflection, you didn't care, and it was just, overall it's just kind of generic. So then we had about the last session that we did, we did two chapters. One chapter because we've been doing this entire campaign with 2 on a standard difficulty. And I was like, you know what? Because it's just like, you're almost always going to be completely injured, both characters, just because it's like, well, no one has defense ever. So we'll just, you're just going to get hurt all the time. So then we're like, okay, what if for the next one we just tried 4? We both control 2, and we'll see how that goes. It was night and day different. Like, it was so much easier. Not the enemies didn't change. The scenario didn't change. It's not like a lot of games where it's like it shows like a little person icon and it's like, hey, like Marvel Champions, it's like, hey, this villain's health is 10 per person. So if you're playing 4 people, it has 40 health. None of it was like that. So I feel like this game also doesn't scale for the number of people. Like, if you're gonna play this game, if you have just 2 people playing, run 2 people each. It's not that much more difficult. All the stuff is still organized there, and you will get so much more done and feel way less overwhelmed by the scenario. Like, the one we did, we had to basically gather a lot of information at this particular bandit camp, and the fact, like, when one person went off to go do something and they were trapped with a bunch of enemies, it was like, oh, well, 3 more people are coming to the rescue. They can all get there and then just completely wipe the floor with all the enemies there. If we did that same scenario and it was just 2, it's like, well, here I am and 1 person is coming to help. We're just completely hosed here. So that really put a damper on us wanting to even continue, even though I'm saying it's not that much overwhelming. It was just the fact that it's like, that's really annoying that we didn't, that it doesn't really scale per the number of players. So it's like we could have just been doing that this whole time. We could have just had 4 people each scenario. It also made the scenario way quicker, because if you're needing people like to go, okay, we need to go check this bookshelf and gather information. Then we need to have someone go over here and check this door to use that information. And then once that door's open, we need to ring this bell. Whatever it is, you could send 3 people to go do that, and one person to fight enemies or something. But if it's just 2 people, it's like you still have to do all those things, but now it's split between just 2 people, and it's too much. So then it's like, okay, well, so the scenarios aren't balanced for the number of players, and that's incredibly annoying. So yeah, we could have just finished it out with 4, but it just wasn't ever really worth it. Like, we were just kind of doing it just for the sake of doing it, to be like, hey, we're done. But we ultimately have no interest in, like, even going into Act 2, which is crazy because whenever Act 2 was officially announced, I was super excited. I was like, oh, hell yeah. But yeah, the last time we played, I was just so over reading everything and just so over. I quit crafting stuff, and I quit, like, looking at what we had attached to our weapons because it didn't matter at the end of the day. You go through the motions every scenario. You move, and then you roll a die, and you're like, okay, I'll do this for 7. All right, I did 14 damage. Yep, it has 89 health, so down to 75. That's cool. And then you do it again, and you're like, okay, that was my first action. I'll do my second action to attack, and then it's like 72 damage. It's like, okay. And that's also kind of like, I said how I like how the laptop manages a bunch of this stuff, and I do, like, especially if you're dealing with percentiles and all that. It's like, I'd much rather have an app deal with all that than an actual player. But whenever you're attacking in all these other games, like, I'll keep using Madara as an example, and you roll your dice, and then you're like, okay, I got my max roll here, so I'm 5 over its defense, so that's 5 damage. Then use my symbols, and boom, 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 and that's 29. You feel good because you can actually look and see how you got to 29 damage, and it's like, that's fucking insane. But in Descent, you just kind of roll, and you're like, okay, so I'll use that surge symbol to get a +1, and I got 4. And then you add 4, and then you just kind of hit apply, and it calculates all that, and then it's like 1 damage, and you're like, I don't even know how it's 1 damage. You do another 4 another time, and then all your percentage stuff kicks off, and then it's like, auto kill. How'd I go from 1 damage to, like, auto? And this is like, I'm not necessarily exaggerating. There are some attacks that just do nothing. Like, you'll get the same result, but then you'll, like, it just, like, all your percentage of stuff doesn't kick off. So then it's just like, oh, I guess I hit just his defense of 15. So I guess I just did 1 damage or no damage. But then you do the exact same thing, and then all of a sudden it kicks off, and then it's like, oh, big number. But you're like, you really just are just hitting the plus button and then apply. And you're like, it is what it is. On the result, I don't feel excited. The numbers don't mean anything. So while all the little, like, resources, like in other games like Kingdom Death Monster, for example, like, having a bunch of resources is just kind of annoying. You just have them there, but at the same time, you can organize all that. Everyone can see it. It's not one person looking at a laptop telling everyone what we have, and they just kind of have to go with it. I feel like the laptop would be super beneficial if everyone, like, if there was, like, a shared code, like for the Frosthaven app, if everyone had a shared code, and then you could all put that in, and everyone can see like, there's one person running it, like, so not everyone can control it, but everyone's running it, but whenever they make changes or click on anything, all the players can see it. So then they can see the resources, they can click on stuff and be like, ooh, what does this do? And then whenever it comes to story, they can read it themselves and not hope for someone else to read it to them. But whenever it's just one person doing it, it just feels like everyone's just kind of there as a person is playing on their laptop or, God forbid, their phone for this game. The interactive elements during the scenarios also became kind of tired. Like, you can only search through books, baubles, and bottles on, bookshelves so many times before it's just annoying until you have to do it. The riddles in the scenarios are so dumb. Like, they're so dumb. And the other thing is, whenever you do get riddles that just give you an overload of information on their worlds, it's like, oh, Umbra and Phyra and Libra. It's like, I don't know what any of this is. But you have no quest log, or you have no, like, hey, I know we're trying to solve a riddle here, but either, like, you have everything in your computer, but I still have to write all this stuff down because you don't have a dedicated section for me to find that pertinent information. Like any big video game, whenever you're doing stuff for a quest, it's like, hey, here's all the information for the quest. Or you go to, like a quest log and be like, here's all the stuff for the riddle that I need. I just need to piece it all together. There's none of that. The best you can do is dig through the log history of separate rounds. So it's like in round 2, if you read a note that tells you some information that you're going to need later, and then 10 rounds later, you find another note, it doesn't take those notes and separate them, so you have both of those pieces. You have to remember in round 2 is when you found that info, so you have to go all the way back for that. It's awful. It makes the riddles so frustrating that you just don't care about action points or anything. So it's like, you know what, I'm gonna what do they call it? It's not bull rush. I can't think of the word right now, but you're just gonna keep trying until you eventually just break on through, and so you can continue the scenario. These are all things that are reasons why we're not continuing the campaign. And none of that's to say that this game is necessarily bad. It's just in a flooded market like this, it just doesn't hold up. Like, the games that I've been playing that are story-driven are Frosthaven, Gloomhaven, Kinfire Chronicles, Midara, Sleeping Gods, Isofarian Guard, and hell, even Aeon Trespass Odyssey is going to be coming with... They're going to be going on, I think, Foreteller for their narration. Oathsworn has their own app with narration. Familiar Tales, Freelancers, not really a campaign, but all those have websites with narration. So this just doesn't hold up, like, for that whenever you're comparing it to all those. Because all the stuff I said in the original discussion still holds true, like, at that given point. And maybe because we took quite some time off, like, because just life events were happening, so we weren't playing it as often. Maybe if we were playing it weekly, or, more consistently than, like, 3 or 4 sessions, once a month, and then it's like not for 6 months, and then we come back. Maybe that would have kind of kept us interested until we finished it. But as time went on, it was kind of like, oh yeah, we have Descent to finish. Why bother? Like, everything about it is just kind of it's lost its sex appeal. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. Like, I'm not going to be getting Act 2. I don't, especially because it's like, I've seen gameplay and I've talked to people that have done run-throughs for it on their channel, and I was like, hey, did they, like, improve anything? Did they add narration so someone doesn't have to get their voice destroyed reading everything? That movement still looks kind of the same. That combat looks kind of the same. It looks like they added a little bit more 3D terrain, and they're like, yep, that's it. It's the same game, just with a little bit more 3D stuff. And nope, there's no narration. The other thing is, like, whenever you're trying to record stuff like this, you can only do so much, and it gets extremely annoying whenever you run out of room trying to place, like, you hit, like, a site token, and then it just dumps all this 3D stuff, and it's like, ugh. Okay, let's break the action, and I know we're all into it, but now let's set up, let's put all this stuff here, and okay, yeah, I need all those pieces, I need to put them all here, and then, oh, sorry, you can't see anymore? Yeah, that's just, get up, I guess. Get up and move around. It just kind of, it just ultimately fell flat for us. Let's see. Yeah, like, again, like, I don't think this game is bad. Like, I'm not sitting here going, oh, after all these scenarios, this game is trash. It's not. It's very serviceable. I can see people really liking it if you don't have a bunch of other games to compare it to, but because I do, it stands out the most, and not in a necessarily good way. This game would have done way better. Like, I like the 3D terrain. I think that is neat, because you don't see that in other games. It's mainly tokens or art. And there's not really any art in this game. And if it is, you most likely don't like it. So the 3D terrain could be a lot more fun if you're not trying to keep it in camera frame. Okay, I get that. But the lack of tactile decisions, the movement, the rolling dice to just put in an arbitrary number and hope it gives you a high result. The enemies I do not find compelling. Like, whenever you get a boss, that's the thing, is like, other games, whenever you get presented with a boss, it's actually a unique boss. And it's like, here's the boss token, here's the boss standee, the boss miniature, whatever it is, and the boss is going to play out completely different. Every boss you fight in this feels like it's just like a different color. It's like in Breath of the Wild, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, whenever it's like, hey, here's a Bokoblin. Oh, here's a silver Bokoblin. It's like, that's the same fucking enemy. It does the same exact thing. It just has way more health. That's exactly how this is. It's like, hey, here's a fairy. Oh, but now we've given it a different title to match this scenario and more health. Oh, does it you do any unique stuff? No, it does what fairies do, but it just is going to take you longer to kill it. Oh, okay. I think there's been one scenario where I actually thought the boss fight was cool, and it was kind of like at the midway point. But then, so enemies are not fun to fight. They're there, again, because it's all done on the laptop. One person is kind of involved in the combat. Everyone else is just rolling and telling them what the number is, and then they do that. And it's not even animated. Like, I think the people kind of do this. And then it goes 72. And you're like, whoa, that was a quarter of their health. And then when they do it, it's just like, all right, they're doing 15 damage. I have 10 health and no defense. All right, I guess I'm one shot. Yeah, it's like, it's there. If you have $150 to spend, I would recommend any of the other games I just mentioned over this. Like, I'm trying to see if there's a game that I've mentioned that this is better than. And no, it's not. All those games I mentioned, all those like 7 or 8 games that are in the genre that I was like, here's all of these. This is worse than them. Maybe it's, I was going to say maybe it's more interesting than Kinfire Chronicles, but it's actually not. Like, because those characters are written and it's again, it's audio, it's read to you. It's just more compelling. You're invested more. There's music, there's ambiance, there's soundtrack. So it's like, this is like playing a video game where you're really, really into bookkeeping. And story comes, dead last for you. And that's perfectly fine if that's what you like. I need to reiterate again that I don't think this game is bad. I just don't want to play it anymore. It's like some people might say that I think it's bad. If you don't want to play it, that's a bad game. Well, subjectively, yes. Like, if someone asked me to play this, I'd probably say no. But objectively, it works. Like, it's still cool to see. And maybe it's really cool to some people who don't play these types of games. But I do. And that's a majority of my channel is like series. So whenever I have such dedicated time or limited time that I dedicate to other games, I can't be spending all that on games that I'm not compelled to even finish, So that's pretty much it. That's the updated discussion for Descent Legends of the Dark. If you were really, really into the series and you were waiting for us to do it, well, we're not. Even the 2 latest sessions that I recorded, I'm not uploading just because it wasn't exciting. And we're not finishing it. Like, we have other plans whenever him and I get together, and with Act 2 coming out, I'm not picking that up either. So, yeah. On a scale of 1 to 10, Descent, Legends of the Dark, let's take a look at what I gave it originally. Decent. Legends of the Dark. Yeah. Okay. So, taking into account what I gave it previously, it's like a 6 is too low because I'm going to drop it to a 7. I think Descent Legends of the Dark is a 7. It's a good game. It's just what I personally want out of narrative-driven campaign games is... Oh, Tainted Grail. There's another one. It just wasn't on Foreteller. But yeah, narrative-driven campaign games, this is just not... standing up to the rest of them, but overall, I think it's still solid. So I'm gonna drop it to a 7. I had given it a 9, so that is a 2-point drop. So do with that what you will. Those numbers don't even matter anyway. But that's my thoughts on Descent: Legends of the Dark Act 1. Let me know what you think of the game in the comments below. Other than that, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful whatever time of day it is for you.
Hey everyone, thank you for watching, and I really hope that you enjoyed the video. If you would like to see more of my content, go ahead and click that subscribe button and the bell to be notified whenever I upload any new content. If you feel like supporting the channel, you can go ahead and click that Patreon link to be taken to my Patreon, and any help is truly appreciated. Other than that, stick around for any other run-throughs or reviews or cool top 10s or whatever I feel like putting on. Other than that, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful whatever time of day it is for you.